She was 18 and walking out of an orphanage. No family, no home, just a small bag and nowhere to go. And then everything changed. A stranger stopped her at the gate and handed her the keys to an abandoned mansion she had never heard of. People would have walked away. They would have sold the abandoned mansion and taken the money. But what she found inside that abandoned mansion wasn't just a house. It was the truth about her past and a secret that would change her life forever. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Ava Mitchell had just turned 18, the age when the system quietly lets you go, and the world expects you to figure everything out on your own. She stepped outside the orphanage gates on a cold Chicago morning, carrying nothing but a small duffel bag and a lifetime of unanswered questions. No family waiting, no place to call home, just a city that moved too fast to notice someone like her. For years, Ava had learned how to survive, how to stay invisible, how to not expect anything from anyone. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every goodbye she had ever known came without warning, and every new beginning felt temporary. Now, standing alone on the sidewalk, she realized something terrifying. This wasn't another transition. This time, there was no one coming back for her. No safety net, no second chances. For the first time in her life, Ava wasn't just alone. She was truly on her own. And the silence of that realization was louder than anything she had ever faced. Ava had barely taken 10 steps past the rusted iron gates of the orphanage when she heard someone call her name. Miss Mitchell. The voice was calm, measured, too formal for the world she had just stepped into. She turned slowly, her grip tightening around the strap of her worn duffel bag. Standing a few feet away was a man who looked completely out of place. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, dressed in a dark overcoat that had clearly seen better days but was still carefully maintained. His gray hair was combed neatly, and in his hand he carried a leather briefcase that looked almost as old as he was. Ava's first instinct was suspicion. People didn't just know her name, not out here, not anymore. Yes, she asked cautiously. The man gave a small, respectful nod. My name is Harold Bennett. I'm an attorney. I've been looking for you. Those words immediately set off alarm bells in her mind. Looking for me, she repeated. Why? He studied her for a moment, as if measuring how much truth she could handle. Then, without another word, he opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. The paper was aged, slightly yellowed at the edges, like it had been waiting a long time for this exact moment. This, he said, holding it out to her, was to be given to you the moment you turned 18. Ava didn't move at first. Her heart began to pound, not from excitement, but from confusion. Nothing in her life had ever arrived with timing like this. Nothing had ever been planned. Who is it from? She asked. Mr. Bennett hesitated. Just briefly, from someone who wanted you to have a choice, he replied. That answer only deepened the mystery. Slowly, reluctantly. Ava reached out and took the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. Inside, she found several official documents, stamped and signed, along with a single object wrapped in cloth. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded it. A key. Not a modern key, but an old one. Iron. Heavy. Ornate. The kind of key that belonged to something important or something forgotten. A chill ran down her spine. What is this? She whispered. Mister? Bennett adjusted his glasses. It's the key to a property that now legally belongs to you. Ava blinked, trying to process his words. A property? He nodded. An estate, to be precise. A mansion located in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. For a moment, Ava just stared at him, waiting for the punchline. A mansion, she repeated, almost laughing. You've got the wrong person. I assure you, Miss Mitchell, he said calmly, I do not. He gestured toward the documents in her hands. Everything is there. The deed, the transfer of ownership, and the legal authorization. As of today, that estate is yours. Ava's mind raced. None of this made sense. She had spent her entire life being told she had nothing, no family, no inheritance, no past worth remembering. And now, suddenly, this. Who gave it to me, she demanded. Mr. Bennett's expression softened, but he didn't answer directly. The previous owner passed away 2 years ago, he said carefully. The estate has remained untouched since then. There were specific instructions that you were not to be contacted until you came of age. Why Ava pressed? Again, that pause. Because whoever left it to you believed timing mattered, he said. They believed you needed to be free before you could decide what to do with it. Free. The word echoed in Ava's mind, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like being dropped into the middle of something she didn't understand. She looked down at the key again. It felt impossibly heavy in her palm, like it carried more than just metal, like it carried expectation. What kind of place is it? She asked quietly. Mr. Bennett exhaled. Abandoned, he admitted. For quite some time, it's isolated. The nearest town is nearly 15 miles away. The structure itself is deteriorating. That sounded more realistic, more like something that belonged in her life. And why would anyone leave something like that to me, she asked. This time, Mr. Bennett met her eyes directly. That, he said, is something you'll have to discover for yourself. Silence fell between them. Cars passed on the street. People walked by without noticing. The world kept moving completely unaware that Ava's entire reality had just shifted. She flipped through the documents again. It was all real, official seals, legal language. Her name printed clearly where it didn't feel like it belonged. A mansion, an inheritance, a past she didn't remember. It didn't feel like an opportunity. It felt like a question, and questions had always led to pain. There's one more thing, Mr. Bennett added, reaching back into his briefcase. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper and handed it to her. Ava hesitated before opening it. The handwriting inside was delicate, almost fragile. If you've received this, it means you're finally ready. The house will tell you what I never could, but be careful. Not everything left behind was meant to be found. Ava's breath caught. She looked up sharply. Who wrote this? But Mr. Bennett was already closing his briefcase. My job, he said gently, was only to deliver what was yours. He handed her a business card. If you decide to sell, call me. There are buyers already interested. You could walk away with enough money to start over, somewhere far from all of this. Start over. That was what she had planned all along. Yet now, her fingers tightened around the key. Because for the first time in her life, walking away didn't feel simple anymore. It felt like she might be leaving behind the only truth she had ever been given. And that terrified her more than staying. The journey to Virginia felt longer than it should have. Ava sat by the window of the bus, watching the world slowly change from crowded city streets to endless stretches of forest and winding mountain roads. Each mile carried her further away from everything she had ever known, and closer to something she couldn't explain. By the time she arrived at the nearest town, the sun was already beginning to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. The place barely looked real. A single gas station, a diner with flickering lights, a few houses scattered like forgotten thoughts. It didn't feel like a place where something important would exist. And yet, this was where the mansion was. Ava adjusted the strap of her bag and followed the directions on the map Mr. Bennett had given her. There were no taxis, no ride shares, just a narrow dirt road leading deeper into the woods. The walk took nearly an hour. The deeper she went, the quieter it became. No traffic, no voices, just the sound of wind moving through the trees and the occasional snap of a twig beneath her feet. It felt like the world was slowly closing in behind her. Then she saw it. At the end of a long, overgrown driveway, hidden behind thick vines and towering trees, stood the mansion. It was larger than she had imagined, far larger. A once grand estate now swallowed by time. The walls were cracked, the paint faded and peeling. Tall windows stared out like hollow eyes. Some shattered, others covered in grime. The iron gate at the entrance hung crooked, creaking softly in the wind. It looked abandoned. Completely. And yet, something about it didn't feel dead. Ava stepped closer, her heartbeat quickening. The air felt different here, heavier, like it was holding on to something. "This is crazy," she murmured under her breath. She could still turn back, sell it, walk away, forget all of this ever happened. But her hand tightened around the key, and before she could change her mind, she pushed open the front gate and walked toward the house. The front door stood tall and imposing, its dark wood scratched and weathered. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the lock. Then she slid the key in. It turned too easily, with a soft click, as if it had been waiting. The door creaked open slowly, revealing darkness inside. A wave of cool air drifted out, carrying the faint scent of dust and something else. Not decay, not rot, something recent. Ava stepped inside. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, echoing through the massive entry hall. Dust covered most surfaces, but not evenly. That was the first thing she noticed. Some areas were thick with it, others disturbed, like someone had walked through recently. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." She moved further in, her eyes scanning every detail. A grand staircase curved up toward the second floor. Portraits lined the walls, faces she didn't recognize. Their expressions faded with time. A chandelier hung overhead, covered in cobwebs, swaying ever so slightly. But then she saw it. On a small table near the entrance sat a glass. Clear, clean, not covered in dust like everything else. Ava froze. Her heart began to pound louder, faster. "That's not possible," she said again, her voice trembling now. She stepped closer. The glass wasn't just clean, it had a faint ring of moisture at the bottom, like it had been used recently. A sudden chill ran down her spine. She wasn't alone, or at least she hadn't been. Ava turned slowly, her eyes darting across the room. Every shadow suddenly felt alive. Every creak of the house sounded like movement. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing into the darkness. No answer. Just silence, but it wasn't empty silence. It was the kind that listens back, swallowing her fear. Ava forced herself to keep moving. Room by room, she explored the mansion. The dining hall was covered in sheets, but one chair had been pulled out slightly as if someone had been sitting there. The kitchen was old, rusted, but the sink was dry and recently wiped. Upstairs, things became even stranger. Several doors were locked. Not broken, not sealed. Locked. From the outside, Ava tried one handle. It didn't budge. Another. Same. Why would anyone lock rooms in an abandoned house? And who had the keys? Her chest tightened. She stepped back, suddenly feeling like she had crossed into something she didn't understand. Then she noticed it. At the end of the hallway, one door stood slightly open. Unlike the others, a faint light spilled out from inside, not bright, but enough to break the darkness. Ava's breath hitched. There was no electricity. She had checked. So where was the light coming from? Every instinct in her body screamed at her to leave, to run, but something stronger pulled her forward. Slowly, carefully. She stepped toward the door. The floor creaked beneath her, each step louder than the last. Her hand trembled as she reached for the door. She pushed it open. Inside, the room was different. Clean, completely untouched by dust. A bed neatly made. A desk with papers stacked perfectly. And on that desk, a single photograph. Ava stepped closer, her heart pounding violently now. She picked it up. Her hands began to shake, because the girl in the photo was her, younger, smiling, standing right here, in this house. Her breath caught in her throat. That's not possible, but the proof was in her hands, which meant only one thing. This place was never just an abandoned mansion. It was part of her past, and someone who knew her, had been here. Not long ago. Watching. Waiting. Ava didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The image of that photograph, her younger self, standing inside this very house, looped endlessly in her mind. It shattered everything she thought she knew about her life. This place wasn't random. It wasn't just an abandoned mansion left behind by some distant stranger. It was connected to her, deeply, and that realization was far more terrifying than the idea of being alone. At sunrise, pale light filtered through the cracked windows, casting long golden streaks across the wooden floors. The mansion felt different in daylight, less threatening, but no less mysterious. Ava sat at the edge of the bed in that strange, untouched room, the photograph still clutched tightly in her hand. "This doesn't make any sense," she whispered. For 18 years, she had believed a simple truth. She had been unwanted, left behind, forgotten. But this house, this room, this said otherwise. Someone had kept pieces of her life, preserved them, protected them. Why? That question pulled her to her feet. If there were answers anywhere, they were in this house. She began searching with new eyes, not as someone trying to escape, but as someone trying to understand. The desk in the room was the first place she looked. The papers stacked neatly on top weren't random. They were organized, deliberate. Ava flipped through them carefully. Most were notes, observations, dates. Her dates? Her stomach dropped. There were records of the different foster homes she had been placed in. Notes about her school transfers. Mentions of incidents she barely remembered, times she had gotten into trouble, times she had been sick, times she had run away and been brought back. Details no stranger should know. Her chest tightened. "Someone's been watching me," she whispered. But it didn't feel like surveillance. It felt personal, careful, like someone who couldn't be there but still refused to let her go. Her hands trembled as she opened one of the drawers. Inside, she found a bundle of letters tied together with a thin, faded ribbon. Old, worn, but preserved. Her name was written on the top envelope. Ava, in delicate, careful handwriting. Her breath caught as she slowly untied the ribbon. The first letter was dated 10 years ago. She unfolded it. My dearest Ava. Today you turned 8. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined it anyway. I imagined your smile. I imagined you blowing out candles. Even if no one thought to give you any, I'm so sorry I can't be there. But please know there isn't a single day I don't think of you. Ava froze. Her vision blurred instantly. No one had ever written to her like that. No one had ever spoken to her like she mattered. Her fingers tightened around the paper as she read on. You may grow up believing I abandoned you. I know that's the story they'll tell, and I hate that I can't change that. But one day, if you find your way here, I hope you'll understand. I didn't leave you because I didn't love you. I left because it was the only way to keep you safe. Ava's breath hitched sharply. Safe? From what? Her mind raced, but the letter didn't explain. It only left more questions. She grabbed the next one, and the next. Each letter marked a different year, each one filled with pieces of a life she never knew existed. There were stories about her childhood memories Ava barely recognized. Moments of joy, moments of fear, moments someone had witnessed, or at least remembered. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she read. This wasn't a stranger. This was someone who knew her, someone who loved her, someone who had been there, even if she couldn't see them. Hours passed without her noticing. The sun climbed higher, flooding the room with light. But Ava remained on the floor, surrounded by letters her entire life laid out in ink and paper. The anger she had carried for years began to crack. That deep, silent resentment, the belief that she had been unwanted, started to feel wrong, because this didn't look like abandonment. It looked like sacrifice, painful, deliberate, and deeply human. Her chest ached as she picked up the final letter in the bundle. The handwriting was weaker, more fragile. If you're reading this, it means you made it here. It means you're safe enough now. I wish I could be the one to explain everything to you in person. But life doesn't always give us that chance. The house holds the rest of the truth. There are things I had to hide, things I couldn't risk putting into words. Please be careful. Ava, and please forgive me. Ava lowered the letter slowly, her hands shaking. Forgive me. Those two words echoed in her mind. For years, she had imagined saying them to someone else. Now, someone was asking them from her, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel empty. She felt connected, seen. Her eyes drifted around the room again, but this time, everything looked different. This wasn't just a place. It was a message, a story, a truth waiting to be uncovered. The mansion wasn't a burden. It wasn't something to sell and forget. It was the only place that had ever held on to her past. The only place that knew who she really was. Ava wiped her tears, taking a slow, steady breath. The girl who arrived here yesterday had been ready to walk away, ready to trade this mystery for a few $1,000s and a clean start. But that girl didn't exist anymore. Now, she needed answers, and no matter how difficult they might be, she wasn't leaving. Not anymore. The words from the final letter echoed in Ava's mind long after she finished reading it. The house holds the rest of the truth. She stood slowly, her body still trembling not from fear anymore, but from something deeper. Anticipation. If there were answers hidden here, she was going to find them. No matter what. Ava began searching the room again, this time with sharper focus. Every detail mattered now. Every object could be a clue. Her eyes moved across the walls, the furniture, the floor, until something caught her attention. One section of the wall behind the bookshelf looked off. It was subtle, almost invisible. But the wood paneling there was slightly misaligned. the edges just a fraction uneven compared to the rest. Her heart skipped. Slowly, she stepped closer. She ran her fingers along the surface, pressing gently. Nothing. She tried again, this time applying more pressure near the corner. A faint click. Ava froze. Then, with a low, heavy sound, part of the wall shifted inward. Dust fell as the hidden panel slowly opened, revealing a narrow, dark passage behind it. A secret room. Her breath caught in her throat. This was hidden, she whispered. For a moment, she hesitated. Every instinct told her this was the point of no return. Whatever she found inside would change everything. But she had already come too far. Grabbing a nearby candle from the desk, she lit it with shaking hands and stepped into the passage. The air inside was colder, stiller, like time had been sealed away. At the end of the narrow corridor, she found a small room. Unlike the rest of the mansion, this one wasn't abandoned. It was preserved. Perfectly. A wooden desk stood in the center. Shelves lined the walls, filled with neatly organized documents. A single chair sat facing the desk as if someone had just stood up and walked away. Ava stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding louder with each step. And then she saw it. On the desk, a framed photograph. Not of her as a child, but of a woman. Beautiful, strong. Her eyes, Ava's breath stopped. They were the same as hers. A mirror. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. Her hands trembled as she picked up the frame. She didn't need anyone to tell her. She knew. This is my mother. The word felt foreign on her lips. Mother. A concept she had buried long ago. Next to the photograph was a journal, leather-bound, worn from years of use. Ava opened it slowly. The first page confirmed everything. If Ava ever finds this, then it means I succeeded. Her vision blurred instantly. She read on, her heart racing. The journal told a story she had never imagined. Her mother Elena had not abandoned her. She had been running from a past filled with danger, from people who would stop at nothing to find her. A powerful family, a legacy built on secrets, money, and control. Ava's father had been part of it. And when her mother tried to escape, tried to take Ava away from that life, they came after them. Threats, surveillance, relentless pressure. They would have taken you from me. One entry read, they would have turned you into something I refused to let you become. Ava's hands shook violently as she turned the page. So, I made the only choice I had left. I disappeared, and I made sure you disappeared with me. The plan had been unthinkable, painful, but necessary. Her mother had placed her into the system deliberately, because it was the one place no one would think to look, a place hidden in plain sight. I knew you would hate me one day. The journal continued. I knew you would believe I didn't want you, and that thought has broken me every single day since. But hatred is safer than being hunted. Tears streamed down Ava's face. Everything she had believed, every painful memory, every lonely night, it all shifted under the weight of the truth. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had sacrificed everything. Her life, her identity, her chance to be a mother. Just to keep Ava alive, Ava dropped into the chair, overwhelmed. The room felt smaller now, heavier with emotion. But the journal wasn't finished. The later entries grew weaker, the handwriting less steady. I built this place for you. One line read, a place they can't reach, a place hidden from everything that tried to take you away. The mansion wasn't random. It was a refuge, a fortress. Every locked door, every hidden passage. It was designed to protect, to hide, to keep secrets buried. I knew I wouldn't have much time. The final entry said, so I left everything I could behind, not money, not wealth, but truth. Because one day you would need to know who you are. Ava closed the journal slowly, her entire body shaking. For the first time in her life, she knew where she came from. But that truth came with a cost. Because if her mother had been hiding, if she had gone to such extremes, then the danger she feared might not be gone. Ava looked around the hidden room again, her breathing unsteady. This wasn't just an inheritance. It was a warning. And an opportunity. She could still walk away, sell the house, disappear again. Or she could stay, learn the truth, finish what her mother started. Her grip tightened on the journal. For the first time, she didn't feel lost. She felt chosen. This wasn't just a house. It was her past, her identity, her second chance. And this time, she wasn't running. The decision didn't come all at once. It settled into Ava slowly, like the quiet realization that something inside her had changed forever. She stood in the hidden room for a long time, the journal still clutched in her hands, her mother's words echoing through her mind. For 18 years, Ava had built her identity around one painful belief she had been left behind, unwanted, disposable. That belief had shaped everything, how she saw herself, how she trusted others, how she moved through the world like someone who didn't belong anywhere. But now, that foundation was gone, replaced by something far more complicated and far more powerful. She hadn't been abandoned. She had been protected, loved in silence, and that truth demanded something from her. Ava stepped out of the hidden room, her movement slower, steadier. The mansion no longer felt like a trap or a mystery meant to scare her away. It felt like a responsibility, a legacy. Her legacy. She walked through the hallway again, past the locked doors, the peeling walls, the dust-covered floors. Yesterday, she saw ruin. Now, she saw potential. "This was built for me," she whispered. "Not just the walls. The secrets. The safety. Everything." For the first time in her life, Ava wasn't reacting to what the world had done to her. She was choosing what came next. And she chose to stay. The first few days were the hardest. There was no electricity, no running water in the parts of the house. The air was thick with dust, and every room felt like it had been holding its breath for years. But Ava didn't leave. She started small, opening windows, letting light in, letting the house breathe again. She found old cleaning supplies in a storage closet and began wiping down surfaces, one room at a time. Each movement felt symbolic, like she wasn't just cleaning the house, but clearing away years of misunderstanding. Every creak of the floor, every groan of the walls, it no longer scared her. It spoke to her, like the house was waking up alongside her. Days turned into weeks. Ava established a rhythm. Wake up with the sunrise. Work until exhaustion. Learn as she went. She had never fixed anything before, not really, but now she was patching broken windows, repairing furniture, clearing out debris from the overgrown yard. Her hands became rough. Her muscles ached. But for the first time in her life, the pain meant something. She wasn't just surviving. She was building. At night, she returned to the hidden room. The journal became her guide, her connection, her teacher. She read every entry slowly, carefully, piecing together the story her mother had left behind. The danger, the past, the reasons behind every decision that had once felt like betrayal. And with every page, Ava felt something inside her shift. The anger she had carried for years didn't just disappear, it transformed. into understanding, into strength, into purpose. One evening, as she stood on the front steps of the mansion, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, Ava realized something she had never felt before. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of meaning. This place, once just a strange inheritance, had become something else entirely. It was her anchor, her proof, her second chance. But the biggest change wasn't in the house. It was in her. The girl who walked out of that orphanage had been afraid of everything. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of being forgotten. Afraid of not mattering. That girl would have sold this place without hesitation. Taken the money. Run as far away as possible. But that girl didn't exist anymore. Now, Ava stood taller, spoke with certainty, moved with intention. She wasn't just someone the world had shaped. She was someone who could shape her own future. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror she had cleaned and restored in one of the bedrooms. For a moment, she just looked at herself, really looked. Not the broken version she used to see, but the person she was becoming, stronger, braver, rooted. "You didn't leave me," she whispered softly, thinking of her mother. "You prepared me." Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were from something deeper. Gratitude. Ava walked outside, the fresh mountain air filling her lungs. The mansion stood behind her, not perfect, not fully restored, but alive again. Just like her. There was still so much she didn't know. So many answers left to uncover. And maybe so many dangers still waiting in the shadows of her family's past. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what was coming, because she finally understood something important. She wasn't the girl who had been left behind. She was the one who had been chosen to survive, to rebuild, to finish what her mother started. And this time, she wasn't running from her story. She was stepping into it. Seasons began to change. What once felt like an abandoned, forgotten place slowly transformed day by day, piece by piece into something alive. The mansion was no longer silent. It breathed. It lived, and so did Ava. By the time autumn arrived, the estate looked different. The broken windows had been repaired, allowing golden sunlight to pour into rooms that had once been trapped in darkness. The floors, once buried beneath dust and decay, now carried the warmth of footsteps, her footsteps. The garden, once wild and overgrown, had been cleared and replanted. Small signs of life pushed through the soil flowers. Herbs, even a few vegetables. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in her life, Ava had built something that wouldn't be taken away from her. She stood on the front porch one evening, watching the sky turn shades of orange and deep purple as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The same place that had once filled her with fear now gave her peace. This house was no longer a mystery. It was her home. Inside, the mansion told a different story now. The grand hallway no longer echoed with emptiness, it held memories. The dining room, once covered in dust, now held a simple wooden table where Ava ate her meals each night. The hidden room, the place where everything had changed, remained untouched, preserved as a reminder of the truth that had reshaped her life. She visited it often, not with fear, but with gratitude. Ava had learned more than how to fix walls or repair broken floors. She had learned how to rebuild herself. The anger that once defined her was gone. The loneliness that once followed her everywhere had softened. And in its place, there was something stronger. Belonging. She wasn't just someone who had survived the system anymore. She was someone who had roots, a past, a story that mattered. One afternoon, as she sorted through the last of the documents in her mother's hidden room, Ava found something she hadn't noticed before. A sealed envelope. Her name written on it. Again. She opened it carefully. Inside was a final letter. My Ava. If you've made it this far, then you've done more than survive. You've become strong enough to choose your own path. This house was never meant to hold you back. It was meant to give you a place to begin again. You are not defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you choose to build from it. And no matter where life takes you next, this will always be your home. Always. Ava closed her eyes as the words settled deep within her. For so long, she had searched for something she couldn't name. A place, a person, a reason. And now, she realized she had found all three. That night, she lit a fire in the fireplace for the first time. The flames flickered softly, casting warm light across the room. She sat in front of it, the journal beside her, the letter resting in her hands. The sound of the fire crackling filled the silence, not empty, but comforting. Alive. I'm home, she whispered. The words felt unfamiliar, but right. Weeks turned into months. Winter came, covering the mountains in a blanket of white. But inside the mansion there was warmth, not just from the fire, but from something deeper. Ava had created a life here. Not one handed to her, not one borrowed, but one she built piece by piece with her own hands. And more importantly, she had rewritten her story. The girl who once believed she had been abandoned had discovered the truth. She had been loved fiercely, protected quietly, and guided even from a distance toward this very moment. The mansion was no longer just a place tied to her past. It was a foundation for her future, a place where she could grow, where she could choose who she wanted to become. Standing at the edge of the property one morning, watching the sunrise stretch across the mountains, Ava took a deep breath. The world in front of her no longer felt empty. It felt open, full of possibility. She didn't know exactly what would come next, but for the first time in her life, that didn't scare her, because no matter where she went, no matter what challenges waited ahead, she would never be that lost girl again. She had a home now. She had a past that made sense. And most importantly, she had the strength to build whatever came next. And this time, her story wasn't something she was running from. It was something she was proud to carry forward. No one begins with a perfect life, but anyone can rebuild one if they're willing to face the truth and keep going. As the morning light stretched across the mountains surrounding the old mansion, Ava Mitchell stood on the porch, not as the girl who once walked away from an orphanage with nothing, but as someone who had finally found where she belonged. But this time, she wasn't just rebuilding a house. She was rebuilding a life. With every repaired wall, every window she opened, every memory she uncovered, she was creating something more than a home. She was creating a future. Because she understood now the story she once believed about herself was never the truth, and the love she thought she lost had been guiding her all along. The abandoned girl who once believed she had nothing became the woman who built everything from the ground up, not just for herself, but for anyone who has ever felt forgotten, unwanted, or left behind. Because Ava's story isn't just hers anymore. It belongs to every person who has ever questioned their worth, every soul searching for a place to call home, and everyone brave enough to turn pain into purpose. Because sometimes, what looks like an ending is really the beginning of who you're meant to become. For Ava, this mansion was never just an inheritance. It was a second chance. And for those who are still searching, your story isn't over yet. It's just waiting for you to step into it. The end? Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to continue the journey, and don't forget to subscribe if you believe that even the most broken beginnings can lead to something beautiful.